I think they've won 6 in a row. As far as the results go, they are arguably the top team here in the conference. But as a footnote, they are one of the only teams not to play either Pensacola or Tallahassee.
We're coming out dangerous.
Rockets going off.
Sometimes the brightest stars shine for the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They heard us all across Tallahassee after that one.
We got to bring home the W.
Oh yeah, we're gonna destroy them.
Put them on the Heisman watch.
They're fine, man.
Big Ben Player of the Year.
We're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
I played a little adult league, goalie.
I felt like I scored in the World Cup, but I didn't even score.
Controversy? Question mark?
Pure chaos.
To go crazy was insane.
Chris Petley, he was the defensive MVP of the 2019 season.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in my prime right now. Let's go.
All right, and welcome to TallySCtalk podcast. We know it's been few and far between, but of course we had to come back with you with an update. So apologies for the delay and lack of action. Here it has been a turbulent, wild, topsy-turvy here 2025 season, but thanks for coming aboard back with us here. Of course, shameless plug, make sure to hit that subscribe, that like, that share, that whatever to get it going. We'd love to continue to spread the love here within the TSC family and keep growing, of course. So with that out to bed here, big time here, July. We know this is kind of the weird zone. There's a lot of mixed feelings involved here at the lower league. Of course, you're trending towards the playoffs. And of course, shout out to Coach Joel, JDC, get to Coach Joel, JDC getting us to the playoffs and the rest of the staff. Of course, third straight year, TSC is getting back into the playoffs. You know, I had we're the throwback here today. I got the 2022 on. So shout out to the 2022 squad. You're in our hearts here. But going forward here with this 2025 season, a couple storylines. Unfortunately, as you know, no Ben, no Trent here today. So it's just me. So unfortunately, going to have to put up with that here for the time being. But just wanted to kind of get back, and I know that people have been asking some questions of all these playoff scenarios. So we finally locked in the playoff seed here for the Gulf Coast Conference in the League for Clubs. But you look out to this bigger picture, and it's actually kind of an interesting storyline, which is developing for some excitement here today. So basically, to put it to bed, the standings have locked. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The top 4 teams in the playoffs are going to be Pensacola, Union 10, Tallahassee, and GAFA FC. So, of course, we have a Western to Eastern split that's dividing into the playoffs, right? For those of you familiar with the club, the franchise, the program here, you're pretty familiar with that. I assume you understand that, what's going on. So this upcoming Wednesday, which will be, I believe, the 9th, if my math is correct, July 9th, first round, the semifinals of the Gulf Coast Conference playoffs going to be going on. So Tallahassee, since we were unable to win the Eastern Division, we're going to be headed on the road. So we're going to be traveling out to Daphne, Alabama. We're going to be playing a really, really hot Union 10 squad. I think they've won 6 in a row. As far as the results go, they are arguably the top team here in the conference. But as a footnote, they are one of the only teams not to play either Pensacola or Tallahassee. So take that as you will. But it'll be a tough contest. You got to hit the road. It is playoffs. And then, like we said, the timing of this July is always tough because this is when a lot of the collegiate players have to go back to their schools or get ready to go back to their schools here for their service for the fall. You know, you get the fall camp, and then you roll into the fall season, and then you're off and rolling. So this is kind of the attrition standpoint of that time of year. So we know already Danny Chetry, Joe Warren, thank you for your service, gentlemen, have headed back, and we're assuming a couple more are going to be chipping away. So we'll try to give those updates and keep you posted as soon as we can, but that's kind of the flow here going for lower league, and all teams experience this. So this is all things that you kind of get, and funny that, I wouldn't say funny, but you see some kind of similar things going on with the national team, which we'll get to a little bit later. But so this is the timing that we have here. But let's get into the matchups. So we told you about the 4 teams Tallahassee going to be hitting the road, and then Pensacola will be hosting, of course, GAFA FC. So they've already previously met twice. Pensacola won both times. So I think from the outside looking in, not getting super into it, but with that standpoint, I think you feel pretty confident with Pensacola at home punching through, which puts them in the finals. So on over to the flip side, Tallahassee is going against a tough Union 10 team, like we said, winning 9 out of 10 this season. I think 6 in a row, longest win streak in the conference, I believe. And so they've been really hot. So how does Tallahassee match up and hitting the road? We got to hit that I-10 corridor. We're going to have to take the bridge past the old Busy Bee. And so, you're going to get log jammed, or not Busy Bee, the big gas station out there, Buc-ee's, out there on that corridor, hit that traffic jam as you cross the border. So that'll be fun, as always. So something to keep an eye on. And that will be interesting for Tallahassee. Hey, can we go on the road against a team that we have not seen? Because it feels like all the big road games we're familiar with these squads. Obviously, outside of Valdosta, who is new this year, but we know Sowegans a little bit. Well, obviously, Pensacola, we've played 100 times, it feels like. So what do we do against a Union 10 team that we have not played? So they'll be interesting to watch. Obviously, they can put it in, score some goals, solid defensively from what we've seen. They almost ran the table. They were 2 goals away from a perfect 30-point season for them. So, they're coming in confident. And so regardless of what you think as we get into the strength of schedule debate, right? Funny that people from the Florida State territory, people from the Alabama territory are getting into, once again, a strength of schedule standpoint. So I understand that as I got the FSU helmet up here. Shout out, Go Noles. Hoping for a bounce back season. But as we get forward with that, that's going to be something to watch. Can they keep it going? Can they get it rolling? I'm confident that not only with the roster that we have here with TSC, but the returning players as well. As you see, Audie Jepson, which I think is huge, getting healthy, and he seems to already be in form. Just a couple games back, but he threw in a hat trick against Valdosta. He seemed to be gelling really well with the lineup, and I really like the attacking standpoint there, the attacking triangle that I see up here. And those are my 2 kind of keys for Tallahassee, is the attacking triangle and the defending triangle. How are we able to keep those in place? And those are some of the key components of how far Tallahassee could go. So keeping in the short term, obviously it's Tallahassee against Union 10, and then whoever wins both of those games will meet in Wednesday. So an interesting scenario for Tallahassee. If GAFA pulls the upset, Tallahassee would host that conference championship on the Saturday, the 12th, I believe. And then if GAFA does not win, Pensacola wins. Tallahassee, with a win over Union 10, of course. So jumping to that conclusion, would play Pensacola. Once again, Pensacola, the barrier to entry, the gatekeepers out here in the Gulf Coast. So, but you look beyond that, and the situations get really interesting as we gotta go forward into the playoff picture as a whole. And this is where it gets wild, is because regardless of who comes out of the conference, whether it's Pensacola, whether it's Tallahassee, whether it's Union 10, all those teams, because of the goals scored and the points accumulated throughout the season, will be the favorite to host, which would be the Final Four. So that's the thing. Tallahassee currently with the 4-team playoff. Once you get through that, then all of a sudden you're into the national semifinals. You get through your conference. So let's say you beat Union 10, you beat Pensacola, then all of a sudden you're in the Final Four and you get paired up with all these other conferences going forward. And so with the points, they would actually host the tiebreaker, or excuse me, not the Final Four, it'd be the Elite Eight, I guess. For your conference, you're hosting the Elite Eight. And so it looks like if you project it through, you've got a couple teams out of the Texas division is basically who we're going to be paired up with. I think the favorite is FC Dallas, the MLS team. They've got a U23 squad that's in the league for clubs. I feel confident that they're going to be the team that we get paired up against, but based on goal differential, Tallahassee would come back into the capital city, whatever that weekend would be. I believe it's the 19th, 20th, if I'm looking at my notes here correctly. Yeah, the 19th or the 20th. So I think Tallahassee would try to get that Saturday if they could, which I believe would be the 19th. But looking at it here, it'd be FC Dallas, Austin, Central Dallas, or Corinthians would be the squads that we'd be going up against. But you look about the goal differential, Tallahassee sitting way up there, looking good on goal differential. I think it's 36. These other teams 31, 19, 10, 13. So they would win the tiebreaker and host a potential Elite Eight matchup, which would be wild. The South Regional Final. If they get through that, then obviously they go to the Final Four and the competition punching through there as all their regions converge. And I think that will be held in the Dallas area. So that's another thing is, hey, if Tallahassee gets this far, and let's say they take down FC Dallas, it's like, do they or can they punch through to take a weekend out there? And what's the team looking like? How many players do we have left? We may have to draw up that summer squad, say, boys, we need you going forward as they've been a part of the training regimen and everything else kind of going forward. Here would be an interesting standpoint of the battle of attrition through the season. Now we're getting into late July. Almost all our college guys are probably going to be gone. And so what does the team look like? And then also, that's a big bag, having to go out to Dallas, potentially having to stay the weekend, the road trip. It's like a 2-day trip basically out there if you're going to drive. And so for, Tallahassee International Incorporated Soccer Club, the global headquarters, do we have enough funds to be able to make the trip? So as you're planning it out, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's almost like, do you want to go to Dallas? And then what happens there? But of course, those are a lot of questions to be answered. And then also, I think something that needs a little more research is the League for Clubs tied to the U.S. Open Cup? Do we get any bids, or would we have to go into a qualifier stage? Is that something that a club would want to pursue? So these are all things to consider. But in the short term, you got to take care of business against Union 10. And then if you get through that, you got to take care of business against Pensacola. Those, of course, are your objectives. I know a lot of people asking as far as what are the keys to the roster, or what are kind of the linchpins, so to speak, or where do you see the factors? So if you are losing these players, which are the ones that you'd like to keep? Obviously, we love all our boys, right? But I think as far as the key to what you see for the success of a lot of what Tallahassee's been going to is the consistency out of the back. And to me, as a big football fan, somebody who watches a lot of high school ball and then college ball, of course, you see it all starts with the line. And so to me, the back line here in soccer is very reminiscent of like the offensive line for football. And so I think just the consistency of the triangle in the back with Hunter, Santiago in the middle, and then, of course, Marcos, who's been pretty lights out this year in goal, is to me a huge key. So the longer we can keep that trio intact, the longer we can get kind of going forward. Granted, I think the scoring and the offensive threat and the power that Tallahassee's brought, I think not only with the league change has shown itself, but I think it just the goals in general. And you see the production and the style of play that they're playing with, the attacking mindset, the drive, taking people one-on-one, but also creating opportunities, I think has probably been the best in franchise history this season. And you look at the goal scorers, Volstein, I think he's got 6. Sanchez, I think, leads us with 7, which their combination has been awesome. And Diego Sanchez, I think, has a lot of, as you see, for those of the fans of the national team, I think a lot of his game matches up with Diego Luna, not just because of his namesake, his cousin Diego, the connection, but I think just stylistically the way he plays. But him and Volstein's connection has been really fun to watch here. And then I think when you slot Jepson underneath of them for that kind of inverted triangle that you see on the attacking end, dynamite. And you saw what Jepson can do when healthy, buried in a hat trick against Valdosta. So that's another thing that flows with it here today. I think health-wise, Tallahassee getting into a good place. Zuri, good to see Zuri first game out here. And then, of course, Audie had his most recent first home game back. A lot of the people, Jepson was a fan favorite back in 2024, so good to see him get back into the mix. So right now is, of the squad that we have, how long can we take it and how do we match up? I think anytime you go against Pensacola, it's going to be a dogfight. And so that'll be interesting. Hey, can Tallahassee get to the championship? And if so, what's that looking like? So we assume Pensacola's there. So Pensacola, once again, going to gatekeep. And then potential home game. If we get through that, so 2 more wins, they could host that FC Dallas team. Granted, that Texas conference is brutal. And I think that's going to be a really tough matchup. And I think a lot of the FC Dallas guys would be full strength there. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of team that they would bring out to Tallahassee if we get to that point. But obviously, that's a long way to go. We know Union 10, offensive-minded squad. So that defensive triangle that I talked about, if we have Hunter, my guy from Chico, if we have Santiago, if we have Marcos, are we going to be able to lock it down, keep them at bay? Because we know the offense can do work, and we've seen that all season long. I believe it was only the one Pensacola game that Tallahassee has fared to score. So are we going to be able to go forward with that? We love the attacking weapons that we have before us, and I think the team's playing really well. Of course, if we can get to the Pensacola game, if we can get that first playoff game under our belt, so not using this as like a lookover game, I think is key to me. Hey, are we going to respect Union 10 despite the strength of schedule, what we perceive as a lesser strength of schedule? And then are we going to take care of business? Can we go get Pensacola on a nice Saturday showcase? Because that would be wild, because that's going to be a big weekend out in Pensacola. So they might actually get a wild draw, because you got the Blue Angels that will be in town for their post 4th of July conference that weekend. And so it's going to be a whole thing. There's going to be a lot going on in the Pensacola area. So if Tallahassee is able to get that back and make that trip, that's going to be an awesome game. And we know another installation of what would be a low-key A50 Cup. Obviously, it's not going to factor into the standings, but bragging rights onto the table. And I think Pensacola's still kind of pissed. They got the A50 Cup, right? But, we beat them in their place earlier this year. Shout out Braden Paul for the decisive game-winning goal in that 1-0 win late against Pensacola. So that's why we rely on the defense. The defense to be tested. Marcos had a great game and was really a heroic game. I think by far his best game of the year. We needed him in that contest to really help us get the dub going forward. So can they do that again? So those are the big kind of headlines here today. Valdosta, not much of a recap here today. Not to put down Valdosta, but it's their first year. They're growing. We know where TSC was in their growing year, and they got thrown in with a couple big dogs, right? Union 10, GAFA, Tallahassee, Pensacola. And so that's a rough draw, having to pay Tallahassee and Pensacola combined 5 times. Really big ask for them. But I trust in Coach V, and I'm hoping he's going to be back, and he put together a scrappy squad, and, they were able to get a big win earlier this season. So pending the result here, as long as Mobile doesn't beat Pensacola Academy, Valdosta is not going to be last in the league. So I think that's a win for them, for a budding franchise. So hoping they come back and they'll be stronger and ready to go here, because we know there is a pocket of success, and we know there's some ballers in South Georgia. Tallahassee's been up there. You think about even Sanchez, right? Coming down from TU. He could have gone and played for Sweegans. He could have gone and played for Valdosta. Luckily for us, he came down and played for Tallahassee, and that's been awesome. And he's been balling out, and you can see that. So going forward. So playoffs on the horizon, what we have for the future, who's still going to be here? What does the squad look like? I think those are the 3 big takeaways, what the people have been asking. So shout out to the guys. Fantastic season. Thanks for coming back with us here. And we're hoping for some more magic, because TSE's still looking for that elusive playoff victory. Have not won one here. So potentially able to get one, maybe down the road, bring this back home and start to do some real damage as far as the national scene of the conference. So keep an eye on it. Stay tuned. Be well. Of course, for Andrew Jude, thanks for tuning in for a TallySCtalk podcast. Be well and go get them.